The last few Ask the Prof videos I've done have been on what I'm calling the Sniff Test. The first video was a brief discussion of the 5 steps that I go through to determine if a product is good. Does it do what it claims that it do? Is it something that I'm going to incorporate in my day-to-day routine? Would it be a company that I would possibly partner with, so on and so forth? Then I followed that up with a video on Normatec and gave the the 5 steps, brought you through how that does meet each one of those criteria and why they're such a good partner for me personally. I wanted to next go through a company or a product that doesn't quite meet that criteria for me. And before I go into the product name and so on and so forth, I want to just say that this isn't me bashing the product or anything. It just says that maybe it's a little bit too early or there's not quite enough research out there yet for me to incorporate it into my day-to-day routine. I'm not bashing anybody who does use it or anything like that. It's just not something that I'm willing to invest in at this point in time. So I've had a couple of people ask me to do the sniff test on a Go2 device. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of their advertising on Instagram or various other social media. You maybe have seen a few people using them around. It's basically a little mouth guard. You wear it while you're exercising. It works on something called PEEP, which is positive end expiratory pressure. Basically, it puts pressure back as you try to breathe out. So the theory is that that's going to then force oxygen across the lung barrier if there's a little bit more pressure as you're breathing out. So it, in theory, allows you to breathe in without issue, and then has a little bit of pressure on the back. So their execution basically does what they want it to. You can see the little flap flaps up when you breathe out, so it does put a little pressure on, but it flaps down when you breathe in, so that's something that is not restricted at all. So step one, is there a physiological rationale? PEEP isn't something that I knew much about. I've heard about it. I knew that it was used in the hospital setting, primarily with lung issues. It hasn't been applied to sport in the past. And so it's a relatively new concept, and there's not a ton of information out there. And so by going through it, it does seem that it is possible that it could be a benefit in some way, shape, or form. So I gave it a pass on step one, being a physiological rationale. It's not 100% clear whether it is or not, but the theory is there. All right, so step two is relevant research. And this is really where things just fall apart a little bit for this device, unfortunately. And it's not necessarily because it's not a good device or you shouldn't use it. It's just because it's very new and there isn't much research on there. They're trying to push or basically create a new market. All right, so they do have one study out there. It was only a very limited number of people. The average VO2 max was pretty low, so it didn't really apply to me. I believe the average VO2 max was 40, and they classified that as elite, which that doesn't really match up with the elite category. It had both males and females. They were all endurance athletes, so those would be positive things in terms of how it would be relating to me, but with a very low power, so very few participants, and just the fact that they weren't, they were more of a amateur level of athlete. It isn't something that I'm going to use to apply to myself with very much certainty. One of the good things that it does have going for it is, despite only having 8 people in the study, it was able to have a level of significance with a p-value of 0.002, which is really, really hard with only 8 subjects. All right, so that is definitely something that can be pushed up into the positive category. All right, but in terms of relevant research, it wasn't something that I was able to give a pass on. Level of evidence, again, that's something that's a little bit lacking. They did try to do a blind study where they had the Go2 device and then a different type of mouth guard. They did, I mean, that I don't see any better way that you could have set that up. So the study design was very good. It was just lacking participants, and that's just something because they don't probably have the funding and they're just a smaller company at this point. Again, just areas that I think, hopefully in the future that they're able to cover and answer a few more questions in the future. The next step is dissemination of research. And this is really a tough area as well for them. They make claims on their website that it increases endurance by 6%, increase contact sports VO2 max by 6.5%, and increase endurance sports VO2 max by 4.1%, all based off of this, basically the one study that they have. And the problem is that it was a poster presentation. It hasn't been accepted by a major journal yet. I believe it is submitted for publication, but it hasn't been accepted yet. And so again, that puts it really low on the reliability standpoint. And another kind of strike against it is that one of the authors on the study is also one of the owners of the device. And so that creates a bias conflict in there. Again, when you're starting with a small company that's doesn't have a ton of funding backing it right now, it's going to be hard to get grant funding for this type of thing. You've got to do what you can. But those were just a couple of strikes that I just struggled with in terms of whether or not I could get behind the company. And then finally, the target audience. Does the target audience make sense? They're making claims based on VO2 max, and so the mouthguard meant for endurance athletes does fit who they're trying to target. But they also have a mouthguard for football players, which is a purely anaerobic sport. The VO2 max, it's not a relevant thing in an anaerobic sport like that. And so they're really pushing towards a category that it just doesn't make a ton of sense right now with the current information that they have. Now, it's certainly possible that future research will come out and show that there are some anaerobic benefits or possible benefits to helping recover over repeated bouts, things like that. But all you can do, or all I can do, is go off of the current literature that's out there. And right now, I just found it a little bit too short to be able to get behind this this product. And so I would say this does not pass at this point in time. However, I'm certainly going to be keeping an eye open and hope that in the future there'll be some studies that come out that help just further understanding of whether or not this product can be a benefit or not. So there's one that doesn't fit my criteria just yet. Again, please keep sending me some devices or some supplements or whatever that you want me to go through, and I'll be happy to give them a review. Until next time.